أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكر المصائب آل Muhammad alayhim assalam. May Allah increase in our reward and yours for mentioning the difficulties of Ali Muhammad. Tonight marks the start of the 9th of the 10th of Muharram. We've been continuing our series on keeping alive the spirit of Islam and practical ways that we as individuals can ensure our connection to Islam through these difficult times and can ensure that we continue to grow and develop in this life and move towards our ultimate goal of attaining success in this world, which is to attain heaven. So our ultimate success is that we earn the reward of Allah and save ourselves from the punishment of Allah and build a deep relationship with Allah. Many times when we have a practical goal or a goal that we want to achieve or something that is our end goal, we try to motivate ourselves by keeping examples of what we're looking to achieve in front of us. So we look at these as motivations, right? So as a motivation, for example, I'll keep, if I'm going to school, I'll keep the image of a white coat that I want to be a doctor, or I'll keep, for example, something that reminds me of the goal that I'm working towards to make sure that I move in that direction. However, those true goals and success of life, the akhirah, the hereafter, are things that are unimaginable in this life. There's nothing that compares to what Allah has promised in the hereafter. There is nothing that you can take a look at and say, wow, that's heaven, so I'll look forward to that. Because the whole point of the abstract and the whole point of the reward that comes forward is only those who focus and pay attention to it can truly move in the direction of it and not get lost in the confusion of this world. This is the development of the nufs, of the controlling of desires. Desires are those things that I can look at something and I can make it my goal and attempt to achieve it and achieve satisfaction through it. But true success is where my focus is on something that Allah has promised, and my goal is to abstain from everything, train my nafs to stay away from these immediate, sudden impulses, and focus on the great success of the hereafter. This focusing on the success of the hereafter is very challenging because it can be difficult to imagine the hereafter and there's nothing physical we can put in front of us and say, here is the hereafter that I'm aiming to achieve for. So what happens when we have a task at hand that we need to accomplish and the motivators for achieving that task, the physical examples in front of us of the success of that task are few, sometimes we become hopeless because we can't see the end of our path. We can't see the success that we're earning. So we start to lose hope. We start to go into despair and hopelessness because we're constantly working towards something, but we're not seeing the fruits of that success. Now, this is a simple, basic approach to this conversation. There are, for example, signs that we can look at in our lives and see that there is hope and success and that we are accomplishing something. But in the fundamental of man constantly striving after something where you can't see the success in front of you, there's a habit for people to become hopeless and to lose hope. This is what our discussion tonight is how not to lose hope and keeping your hope in times of despair. It happens at times that we look at the challenges of life, we look at the difficulties of life, and we consider it as how can we overcome them? How can we achieve anything with this life when there's so many challenges? And at other times it happens that the more we work towards the direction of Allah, the more the challenges we find in our path, the more difficult the tasks become in our path. And we have this habit that sometimes we may misinterpret those things and see them as lack of success. We may take despair in these processes. However, Allah in the Quran, in Surah Al-Zumar, gives us the instruction. He says, "Qul," say, O Prophet, "Ya ibadiya alladhina asrafu ala anfusihim." O my servants. Allah is saying, say to humanity, he's telling the Prophet, instruct people, O my servants who have acted extravagantly against their own souls. Asrafu ala anfusihim. La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. That certainly Allah is the one who can forgive all of the sins and all of the mistakes that you make. Innahu huwal ghafurur rahim. Certainly Allah is all forgiving and merciful. In life, just because you can't see yourself going to heaven, just because you make mistakes, it should never mean that we lose hope and despair. Allah has specifically said to us, don't lose hope in me. And Allah is the one who can forgive anything. This despair that sometimes comes in, it comes in so casually at times, we don't realize when it's happening. Some people, especially looking at the environment that we're in, we start to say things like, Allah doesn't love me. Allah doesn't care about me. Otherwise, why would I be in so many difficulties? Or there's no way I can get past this. There's no way I can overcome these challenges in life. How is the situation ever going to get better? And then the most horrible thing that some people say is, well, I'm going to hell anyway. How horrible are these things to say? We have to think about these things. We have to see the consequences of our actions and the words that we're using. The first problem that we see is not realizing who it is that we're losing hope in, which is why losing hope, ya'as and qunut. Ya'as is to lose hope and qunut is to despair. Both of these actions are from the grave and mortal sins. They're from the gunahanai kabira, the big sins, the great sins. Because when we despair in Allah, when we lose hope in Allah, it's as if we are refusing to acknowledge His presence in our life. We are refusing to acknowledge His authority. You see, Allah is that one who created us from nothing, who gave us our subsistence and our necessity, that brought us to the phase of life that we can think, we can find food for ourselves, we can solve our problems, we can earn income. There was a time where we could do none of these things. From the time in the womb, where we had no control over our nourishment, our environment, to our time as infants, where every affair of ours had to be taken care of by someone else. Everything had to be done by someone else. We had to be taught every single detail by someone else. Allah is the one who took care of us in all of these phases. He's the one who arranged all of these things to us, that brought us to the condition that we're in today, that we can think, we can speak, we can see, we can activate, we can move our hands and feet, we have discretion over our actions. Now that after we've come to this conclusion, if we turn around and say that Allah has no power or no interest in me, that is the greatest disrespect and dishonor that we can do to that Lord. It's the refusal of acknowledging the might and the greatness of Allah and His ability to control and to resolve every affair. Which is why this hopelessness, Allah Himself is addressing it. Saying, La taqnatu min rahmatillah, don't despair in the mercy of Allah. Allah also says in Surah Ash-Shura, هُوَ الَّذِي يَقْبِلُ التَّوْبَةَ عَنْ عِبَادِهِ وَيَعْفُو عَنِ السَّيِّئَاتِ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا تَفْعَلُونَ. That He is the one, it is in His control to accept from His servants, their pardon and forgive them, repentance, accept their repentance and pardon their sins. And He knows what you do. That Allah is telling you that I am here, I am involved. When we lose hope in Him, it's as if we forget and ignore and are thankless of all of those wonderful things He did in our life before. We forget all of those difficult obstacles we overcame to get to this point in our life. That now when we see a difficulty before us, we imagine, what is our help in this case? This despair, this hopelessness is something that is very frightening, and it's a lack of awareness of Allah. Allah has time and again shown us examples of His assistance and His care and consideration for humanity. The first thing we do is we acknowledge His greatness and we acknowledge His ability. That He who created everything from nothing, is there a problem of mine that He can't solve? Is there a solution that He can't provide? Now, to understand this, we take a look and we see some of the extreme and amazing things that Allah gave us the example of His involvement in our life Himself. Where Allah is the one demonstrating that I can take care of any affair. And we see an interesting conversation with the Anbiya in these matters as well too. For example, in the situation of Nabi Zakaria. Nabi Zakaria, it said, was at the age of 99 and he had no children. 99. And his wife was 98. Nabi Zakaria makes dua to Allah even then, asking Allah for a child. Saying, oh Allah, give me one who will inherit from me. And when Allah promises, you see, Zakaria didn't lose hope in Allah. Even at 99, when it seemed impossible to have children or it seemed unlikely that this should ever happen, Nabi Zakaria doesn't lose hope. And Allah then promises him and says to him, Zakaria, we give you glad tidings of a son. But look at the conversation Nabi Zakaria has. Qala, when Nabi Zakaria is told that he will say, Qala Rabbi, Ana yakunu li ghulaman, wa kanat imra'ati akhiran, wa qad balagtu min al-kibri atiyya. Oh Allah, how can I have a son when my wife is barren? She's old, akhirah. And I myself have reached indeed to an extreme degree of old age. Here, Nabi Zakaria's question is not the question that does Allah have the ability to perform this action. When we look at these questions within the Quran, for example, here we're talking about the situation of Nabi Ibrahim. There's also the situation of we're talking about Nabi Zakaria, where Nabi Zakaria is given the glad tidings of a son. And Nabi Zakaria says, my wife is old, I'm old. The same is true of Nabi Ibrahim. When Nabi Ibrahim and Bibi Sarah had no children, they were into the hundreds. That at that time, when Allah promises them and sends the malaika to give news to Ibrahim of having a children, look what Bibi Sarah said. She says, قالت يا ويلتا أألد وأنا عجوزا وهذا بعلي شيخة إن هذا لشيء عجيب. And she says, oh wonder, in some narrations, she smacked her face and she says, oh wonder, shall I bear a son when I am an extremely old woman and this my husband an extremely old man? Most surely this is a wonderful thing. These statements and the statement, for example, of Bibi Maryam, when she is told that she is going to have a son, وَنُبَشِّرُكِ بِغُلَامٍ وَقَالَتْ أَنَا يَكُونُ لِي غُلَامٌ وَلَمْ يَمْسَسْنِي بَشَرٌ وَلَمْ أَكُ بَغِيًّا. Bibi Maryam asked the question. She says, am I going to have a child when no man has touched me and I have never been unchaste? These questions of these holy personalities, whether we look at Nabi Zakaria in Surah Al-Maryam, verse number 8, whether we take a look at Nabi Ibrahim in Surah Al-Hud, verse number 72, or we go back to Surah Al-Maryam in verse 20, which is the discussion of Bibi Maryam receiving the story of Nabi Isa. All three of these conversations show the idea of astonishment, of surprise, But these surprises are not questioning Allah, that Allah is incapable of doing this action, or that how is it possible, or that it's not even describing that one shouldn't have hope that this will happen. When we look at these examples of these personalities questioning, will this really happen? What we take a look at is the example of the idea of how reality will come about, the astonishment of the reality coming about, not the lack of certainty it will happen. For example, my friend Abbas is a very trustworthy person. Abbas never lies. Abbas comes to me and he says, tomorrow you will receive $10,000. Why 10,000? $1 million. Abbas says, tomorrow you will receive $1 million. Abbas never lies. My astonishment at Abbas would be, Abbas, how am I going to receive $1 million? What's going to happen? Is it going to fall from the sky? Is someone going to bring it to me? Does somebody owe me money? Am I going to get a gift? Is it going to be a prize? All of these questions that I would ask Abbas wouldn't mean that I don't believe and trust Abbas. It would mean that I'm curious about how this reality will come about. Abbas, you told me this is going to happen, but how is it going to happen? It's something so rare and unique. I'm curious to see, how does it come to happen? What are the processes that bring this into existence? The same is true that Allah is demonstrating that, oh humanity, when I bring assistance to my creation, when you keep hope in me and I help you, it comes in a way you can't imagine, such that even the Anbiya and the holy personalities like Bibi Maryam, Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alameen, Bibi Maryam, become curious. And oh Allah, we have yaqeen you're going to make this happen, but how are you going to make it happen? What's going to happen that makes this happen? What will be the process of this coming into about? Because what we know and we understand, this is something so mahal and difficult to come about in reality without your assistance. The same is true. The example is being given to us, that the same way that Allah can take these personalities and give them assistance from where they couldn't imagine, the same is true for every person in their life. If you keep faith in Allah and you keep hope in Him, He'll help you from where you can't imagine. And you'll be left confused. How did it happen? Where did this help come from? How was this possible for this to have happened? Not that Allah can't do it. We have yaqeen Allah can do it. But how He does it is what we're curious about and what we ask questions about. To ask the question of how is it possible is okay. But to ask the question, is it possible? Can Allah do this? That is wrong. Our goal is to always have hope in Allah, because He makes the most amazing things come true and solves the problems in most difficult situations. Look at the examples of how Allah if we have hope in Allah, Allah solves problems in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. Look at the story of Nabi Ibrahim. When Nabi Ibrahim breaks the idols of the people of Nimrud, they made a fire for Ibrahim. And they didn't make it in a day or in an hour. No, it was a lengthy project. They built a special place specifically to house the fire. And then for a long period of time, they stored the wood and they dried the wood, and they made it in such a way that the fire was something fascinating and amazing, and something that they were sure was the equivalent of the punishment they believed someone for disrespecting their gods. You see, Nimrud and the people were mushrikeen. They believed in idols. Ibrahim, they said, accused Ibrahim of destroying the idols. So now when someone has disrespected their God, they want the punishment to reflect the dishonor they have felt for their gods. So they built a giant fire, a fire that was so massive and so big and so hot that the description of this fire comes that if a bird flew over this fire at the distance of 3 miles above the fire's here, bird is way up here, the fire would be so hot that a bird 3 miles above the fire would die from the heat of the fire and fall into the fire. This fire was so hot, they said, we don't know how to get Ibrahim into the fire. We can't walk him in there because as he approaches the fire, he'll die. We can't put him in there because if we go with him, we'll die. We can't put something over the fire and drop him into it because that thing over the fire will burn and we'll die. They created and they invented a catapult. The intention of the catapult was that, okay, this is a safe distance. From here, we'll load Ibrahim into the catapult and we'll throw him into the fire. When this entire situation is happening, the angels of Allah come to Nabi Ibrahim and say, shall we save you? Ibrahim says, no, I don't need you to save me. I have trust in Allah. Allah will save me and protect me. One angel comes and says, shall I fly away with you, Ibrahim? I'll take you from here and we'll fly away. This fire will never come near. Ibrahim says, no. Another says, I shall bat my wings until this fire goes out, Ibrahim, and that will save you. Ibrahim says, no. I have faith and certainty in Allah. Allah will protect me. The hope in Allah that Nabi Ibrahim is demonstrating is the hope in Allah that we have to have. Don't worry about how bad the situation gets. Don't worry about how difficult the situation is. Don't worry about how great the difficulty is. That certainly Allah is greater than all of these difficulties. That Allah has the ability to make anything happen, and that Allah alone will suffice for solving your problems. So look, Ibrahim refuses the assistance of every person except Allah, and he counts on Allah and he keeps his hope in Allah. Even when he's loaded into the catapult and the fire is burning in front and the fire is super hot and the fire is all of these attributes, Ibrahim never loses hope that only Allah is the one who has power over everything. He is the creator of everything. So they throw Ibrahim into the fire. And look at how Allah assists him in Surah Al-Ibrahim in verse number 69. قُلْنَا يَا نَارُ كُونِي بَرْدًا وَسَلَامًا عَلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. That, O fire, Allah says, قُلْنَا, Allah is saying, we said to the fire, be cold and cooling for Ibrahim. That Allah is that merciful one, that if you rely on Him, even everything that exists in reality can change its reality. A fire whose essence is to burn, a fire whose heat is so much that a bird 3 miles above it will die from its heat. When Allah commands on the hope of Ibrahim that Allah will help, the fire changes its attributes and becomes cool for Ibrahim. Ibrahim was catapulted into this fire. And he stayed in the fire comfortably, sitting with Jibreel and spending time. And the fire never burned him, never bothered him, because of the yaqeen and certainty that Ibrahim had in the help of Allah. Look at the example of the story of Nabi Musa. Remember, at the time of the birth of Nabi Musa, every male boy who was being born, Fir'aun was having killed. Every male boy that was born, Fir'aun would go from house to house and knew every house where a child was born, if it was a boy, it was killed immediately. But look, Nabi Musa's mother has yaqeen in Allah, and she's instructed to put Musa into a basket and send him down the river. And this basket with this child is found by the Bibi Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun. The policy of Fir'aun is any child born must be killed. But look at the mercy of Allah, that when the mother of Nabi Musa keeps hope in Allah, that Allah not only protects Nabi Musa, He gives him the protection of Fir'aun, the very man who is intent on killing Musa alayhi salam. Look at the verse of Quran. وَقَالَتْ إِمْرَأَةُ فِرْعَوْنَ قُرَّةُ عَيْنٍ لِي وَلَكَ لَا تَقْتُلُوهُ عَسَىٰ أَن يَنْفَعَنَا أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. Allah makes the statement in the Quran that He says, the wife of Fir'aun intent on killing this child and every male boy who's born. Fir'aun's wife says to him that this child is a coolness of the eyes for me and you. This child will be a source of comfort for us. Don't kill this child. He will be useful to us, or we may take him for a son. And they did not perceive. Look at the hope that if we keep in Allah and we keep trust in Allah, that Allah can turn our enemies into our helpers and the ones who take care of us. When we keep yaqeen in the help of Allah, the very source of difficulty can become the source of support for us. That same Fir'aun who was killing children because he was looking for Musa is the same Fir'aun now who takes the responsibility for nurturing, for caring for providing, for protecting, for helping Musa alayhi salam grow up. This is an example of keeping hope in Allah, that when we keep hope in Allah, that Allah assists us from where help can't come. Look at the example again in the life of Nabi Musa, where we see that Nabi Musa takes the Bani Israel, the 12 tribes, and he flees from Egypt, he flees from Misr, and Fir'aun is now following him with a giant army. Nabi Musa has women and children with him. Musa has old men with him, has all of these people with him, and he's running away, and there's an army that is actively chasing him. An army doesn't have women. An army doesn't have children. An army doesn't have old men. An army doesn't have all of their possessions and belongings that they're running with. Musa alayhi salam has all of these restrictions. The army does not. But look, when Musa comes to the sea, comes to the Red Sea, a normal person would lose hope. He wouldn't know what to do now. I have the sea in front of me with women and children and old men. They can't swim across the sea. They can't get across the sea. There may have been other ways that we could have taken, but Allah commanded me to come here. One might have lost hope and despaired, but Musa knows that Allah is the one who helps in every situation. Allah will never leave him alone. So look at how Allah now answers this question in the Quran. فَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى أن اضرب بعصاك البحر فانفلق فكان كل فرق كالطود العظيم. And then revealed to Musa, strike the sea with your staff so that it had cloven asunder and each part was like a huge mound. The help of Allah. Musa didn't despair. He trusted in Allah, that Allah is the one who will protect me and take care of me. And what did Allah do? He split the sea. Now, the narrations about the splitting of the sea are very interesting. It said that when the sea split, the Bani Israel refused to go into it. First, they were told, go over the sea. Just keep walking and you'll be fine. And they turned to Nabi Musa and they said, I don't think so. No. So Nabi Musa made dua. Allah gave the command. Musa split the sea. And the sea split. So Nabi Musa hit the stone with his staff and the sea split. Now Nabi Musa says to Bani Israel, go. And they say, Nabi Musa, the ground is really soft. You know, there's been water sitting on it. It's the mud under the sea. I think we'll get stuck. I don't think we can do this. So Nabi Musa raises his hands in dua and he says, oh Allah, make the ground firm. Then Allah dries the ground for them and makes it firm for them to walk. Now again, the 12 tribes, they turn and they say, oh Musa, we are 12 tribes. Which of us would go first? That would be a fight amongst us, that which one was the first, which one was the last. Some will be raised in status, some would be lowered in status. The ones at the end would complain about the ones in the front. The ones in the front would feel special. Oh Musa, ask Allah to make for us 12 paths. So Nabi Musa makes dua, and then within the sea, 12 paths appear. And the narration continues further. I said, oh Musa, it may happen that one tribe reaches the other side first and the other side reaches last. Make it so that we can see each other in each of these paths so that we know that one does not get to the end before the other. Nabi Musa again made dua in these 12 paths. The walls between the 12 paths became clear so that they could see each other. Then the Bani Israel went through and passed through the sea in this condition. That the hope of Allah and the yaqeen of the assistance of Allah is such that even these conditions were satisfied for Musa in the offer of the assistance of Musa. You or I, we may be so astounded that even we may be able to walk on water or anything like that. We would take whatever we can get. But in this situation, they had such yaqeen that Allah would provide for them and that Allah would give them the result that they needed, that they asked for every detail that they wanted and Allah provided for them. There's many morals and lessons within the story as well too. But the significance of it is that we keep hope and yaqeen in Allah and He brings help from where we could not imagine. Even in the story of Nabi Ibrahim, when he goes to sacrifice Nabi Ismail, Nabi Ibrahim makes the decision that the time has come to sacrifice Ismail because Allah has commanded. So he takes Nabi Ismail, he covers his eyes and he goes to sacrifice him. Nabi Ibrahim picks up the knife. And when he tries to sacrifice Nabi Ismail, It said that the knife was dull and it would not cut. It wouldn't cut. So Ibrahim then took the knife and he hit it on something else to see, is there something wrong with the knife? In some narrations it's stone, in some narrations it's wood. Then Nabi Ibrahim hits it on something else and the knife cuts through it. And he looks and he says, how ungrateful is this knife that it does not cut when I tell it to cut? And the knife replies, it says, the Khalil commands me to cut and the Lord of the Khalil forbids me from cutting. That the knife wasn't cutting because there was something wrong with the knife. It was because the command of Allah had come not to cut. The hope and yaqeen in Allah that Allah will help where you can't imagine from. That the help of Allah will come from where you can't believe that it could come from. This is why never lose hope in Allah. The point of Allah recounting these miracles, whether it's the miraculous conception of Nabi Isa, whether it's the late birth of Ismail and Ishaq, whether it's the birth of Yahya to Zakaria, ask Allah, in whatever condition you're in, even if it's the most unexpected and impossible thing, Allah can make it come true. And Allah showed you that keeping yaqeen and certainty in Allah and Allah's power, He can change the essence of everything that exists. He can make a knife dull for Ibrahim. He can make the fire cold for Ibrahim. He can make the enemy who is trying to kill you your own supporter for Musa. He can split the sea for Musa. He raised Isa to the heavens. Our own holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, throughout his life counted on the support of Allah and Allah gave it to him and showed humanity the power of Rasulullah. In one instance, when Rasulullah was on a battle, that a flood came and separated the Holy Prophet who was resting under a tree from the rest of his supporters. An assassin came to attack him. And the assassin says, "Oh Muhammad, your army is separated from you now. It is just you and me. Who will protect you from me?" And Rasulullah replies, "Allah will protect me as He always has protected me." And as this assassin charged at the Holy Prophet, he tripped on himself, fell over, and dropped his weapon from his hands. Rasulullah took the weapon of the assassin, sat on the chest of the assassin, and said, "O assassin, now who will protect you from me?" And in this case, the assassin turns and he says, "I submit to the Lord of Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad." Our Holy Prophet throughout his life counted on Allah's assistance in every affair. That our Prophet didn't want anything with the world as long as he counted on Allah. In one instance, Jibreel comes from heaven and he says, "Ya Rasulullah, Allah sends His salam upon you and has offered you that this entire city of Medina, He will make for you from gold and give you all of the wealth of this world, and it will not reduce even 1 ounce from your status on the Day of Judgment." You see, every action has consequence. If you are given wealth, you have to answer for that wealth. If you are given status, it bears responsibility. Every benefit or mercy that Allah gives you has a responsibility tied to it. But look at the love Allah has for Rasulullah, that He says, "I will give you this entire city filled with gold. And you won't have to answer for it. It won't change your status on the Day of Judgment an ounce. You can have all of it and there's no consequence to it. There's no harm in it for you." But look at the love that Rasulullah has for Allah and the trust and the hope he has in Allah. Rasulullah replies, he says, "O Jibreel, all I want is my food for 1 meal a day. And for my next meal, I want to pray to and ask Allah for where my next meal comes. I don't want all of this wealth. I don't want any of this. I just want to have the love of Allah in my heart." These stories, these instructions, are an instruction for us not to lose hope in Allah, to have yaqeen and certainty, no matter how difficult the situation becomes, no matter how hard our circumstance becomes. That Creator who gave us existence is intimately aware of our situation, is intimately aware of our needs of every second and every moment. And if we count on Him and we trust in Him and we keep our faith in Him, that He will help us in ways that we can't even imagine, that the help will come from places that are impossible for us to even believe that our affair could have been fixed this way. Allah is actively telling you, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ أَدْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Allah is telling you in the Quran. He's saying, أَدْعُونِي, call on me, أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ, I'll answer you. Ask me, I'll give you. Look at even the statement in Surah Baqarah, verse number 186, where the people came to the Holy Prophet and they asked him, how should we talk to Allah? Is Allah far away that we should yell? Is Allah nearby that we should whisper? If we want to talk to Allah, how should we talk to Allah? Look at the beautiful statement of Allah. Allah says, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَعِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. If my worshipper asks you, Ya Rasulullah, about me, then tell them that I am near. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِي فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. That if the caller calls to me, I'll answer him. I answer anyone who calls me. So therefore, answer my call. Come to me. Ad'uni. And you'll be rightly guided. The greatest instruction that we have is to take that hope that we have, that yaqeen that we have in our heart that Allah is present, and rely on that hope. This hope exists in each of our hearts. This certainty of Allah's presence exists in every single one of us. A person comes to our sixth Imam and says, he says, how do I know that Allah is there? How can you prove to me that Allah is there? And I don't want external proof. Show me from inside of myself. How do I know Allah is there? Imam Sadiq says, you were on a ship once, and that ship was in a storm. And in that storm, that ship broke apart. And you were left alone in the middle of the sea, hanging to a piece of wood. Imam says, yeah, that did happen to me. Imam Sadiq says, in that moment, when nothing was there was no hope of survival, you still had hope in your heart that you would survive this experience and that you would live. Imam says, yeah, I did. He says, that hope is knowing that Allah is present, and that hope is knowing that Allah exists. That hope is what we need to cling to. That hope is what we need to attach ourselves to, so that we are attached to Allah and we have certainty that no matter how bad our situation is, no matter how great the difficulties are, the Creator is greater than them. And if I rely on Him, if He is the one who could save Ismail, save Ibrahim, save Musa, make Isa, protect all of these personalities, protect Rasulullah, then certainly He can help me as well too, and He is the one I should keep hope in for every affair. That's our goal. Don't lose hope. Allah is giving you examples over and over again of hope, of trusting in Allah, of having yaqeen in Allah. And once we have that yaqeen, once we take that element inside of us, that no matter how bad the situation is, we can succeed, and we count on Allah to help us. Don't look for people's assistance. Look for Allah's assistance. And our affair will come to a completion where we can't imagine from. Our ulama tell us stories of this. In the time of Sheikh al-Ansari, a great famine had struck the city of Najaf. In those days, these amamas were made of very expensive cloth. Sheikh al-Ansari, to assist the people from the famine, he would walk around the town and cut from his amama and give them the cloth to sell, to purchase food for their children so that people could survive. One such day when Sheikh al-Ansari was out helping people, he refused to go home. He wouldn't go home. And the reason he wouldn't go home is he said, I'm helping all of these people, but in my own house there is no food. So Sheikh al-Ansari, not wanting to go home, goes to the haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And while he's there, one of his children come to him and says, Baba, thank you for sending food home. Mom is asking, when will you come home? Sheikh al-Ansari thanks Allah for His mercy and returns home. He realized that Allah had helped him. Where Sheikh al-Ansari didn't have a solution for himself, Allah had created a wasila and sent food for his family from somewhere where he didn't even know from. He didn't even understand where that food came from. But he knew it was by the direction and the mercy of Allah that it was taken care of. And because of that, he went home. That the hope in Allah is such that help will always come from where we don't expect it. Tonight marks the night of the 10th of Muharram, the night of Ashura. This is that night. It is a night of ibadat and worship. Remember that it was on the 9th of Muharram that Abu Abdullah sent his brother Abbas, and he said, "Oh Abbas, ask them for one more night. Ask them to give us one night, that not to fight us today, but to fight us tomorrow. We wish to spend this night in worship of Allah, and know that I love to worship Allah, and we want to spend this night in the worshiping of Allah." Amongst the best a'mal of tonight, if we say, "Labbayk ya Hussein, ya laytana kunna ma'akum fanafuza ma'akum fawzan azima." If we say that we wish that we were with you, Abu Abdullah, tonight's night shouldn't be like a normal night. Tonight's night should be like one who wishes that he was with Imam Hussein. And those that were with Imam Hussein, it said of the camp of Imam Hussein, tonight there was a constant humming and noise that came from this camp of the companions and the families of Imam Hussein, spending this night in worship of Allah, the recitation of Quran and the recitation of Salah. Our goal in this night is, don't make this night a normal night. Don't let your love for Imam Hussein to be lip service. Make this night different. Spend it in worshiping Allah. Think of Allah. Perform acts of ibadat. Pray. If you haven't prayed tahajjud before, pray tahajjud tonight. If you have qadha salah, take care of your qadha salah. If you don't have qadha salat and you pray your tahajjud, there are many amal to do in this night. The recitation of Quran is a great thing to do in tonight. To learn about Islam is a great act of worship. Learn about Islam in tonight. Open a book even of Islamic laws and fiqh and learn some of your responsibilities. It will be shown that you showed love for Islam, love for Allah, the way Imam al-Hussein loved Allah and loved Islam. Don't let this night be a normal night for you. Make this night a night of ibadat and worship of Allah, because that is what the companions of Imam Hussein did for tonight. If you have to sleep, sleep a little. Don't sleep a lot. Worship. Remember Allah. Do ibadat of Allah. If you can't do anything else, do tasbih of Allah. Listen to a majlis of Abu Abdullah. Anything that keeps you in the remembrance of Allah tonight, with the intention that, oh Allah, count me amongst those like the companions of Imam al-Hussein who spent this night in worship. This is that night that it's described was broken by Abu Abdullah into 3 parts. One part he spent with his companions, one part he spent with his family, and one part he spent alone communicating with Allah. When Imam al-Hussein sat with his companions, he gathered all of his companions in one location. He put them all together in one place and he says, "Oh, my companions, my beloved companions, I have been blessed with companions such that not my brother, not my father, not my grandfather, Rasulullah, were blessed with such companions. But this army that's arrayed before us today is not thirsty for your blood. They are thirsty for the blood of Hussein. So I ask you to leave and go into different directions. They won't chase you. They won't bother you. Just go in any direction, but do me one favor. When you leave, take one of my children with you so that they too are not subjugated to the difficulties of this field of Karbala and they are not attacked by this army." Imam Hussein said, "Maybe you are embarrassed to leave me. So what I will do is I will put out the light so that you can leave in the darkness. No one will know that you left. No one will know that you left the field of Karbala in this way." Abu Abdullah turned out the lights and there was a lot of movement in the tent. When Abu Abdullah turned on the light, he saw that all of his companions were still standing before him. But now they had arrayed themselves as soldiers. The old men had tied their waists and stood up straight. The young men stood tall as they could. They turned to Abu Abdullah and they said, "Oh, Abu Abdullah, if they were to kill us 1,000 times and cut us into pieces 1,000 times, and we came back to life 1,000 times, we would wish to sacrifice ourselves for you every time, Ya Abu Abdullah. Oh, Abu Abdullah, our swords are for you, our spears are for you, our lives are for you, Abu Abdullah. How can you ask us to leave you?" Abu Abdullah said that I have been given companions unlike no one else. My father would tell his companions to come and they wouldn't come. Alhamdulillah, my blessing is such that I have companions, I tell them to leave and they won't leave me. In this way, the night began in acts of worship. Said that Abu Abdullah made passes of the field of Karbala to ensure that no one attacked in the middle of the night and that the place was safe. Nafi ibn Hilal was an archer of Imam al-Hussein. And he says, I took it as my responsibility on this night to be the guardian of Imam Hussein, that the army should not perform a secret attack on Imam al-Hussein. He says, I followed Imam al-Hussein and I saw three things in this night. The first thing he says is, as Imam Hussein went from tent to tent, he went to go visit his sister Zainab. When he went to go visit his sister Zainab, she asked again, she says, brother, tomorrow is a difficult day. Are you sure your companions will support you? Have you tested them and tested their loyalty? Nafi says, this made my heart tremble. The daughter of Ali does not trust our loyalty for her brother. He went to Habib. He did not know what to do. Habib was the leader of all of the companions. He went to Habib. He said, Habib, I have heard Zainab questioning our sincerity. I don't know how to answer this question. Habib says, wait 1 minute, Nafi. Habib comes out from the tent. He says, O lions and supporters of Hussein, O Ansar Hussein, bring out your swords and spears. Come to the battle. All of the men ran for their weapons, came out at the call of Habib. The Banu Hashim came out as well. Habib said, oh children of Zahra, this is not for you. Go back and rest. This has nothing to do with you. Habib came and took all of the companions, arrayed them in front of the tent of Zainab, and called out from outside, O Sayyida, we have gathered here, our lives sacrificed for your brother Hussein. Test us however you may. Ask us to sacrifice our lives however you may. We will never leave Hussein ibn Ali as long as we are alive. In this way, Habib showed his defense and the sincerity of the Ansar of Imam al-Hussein. These companions who waited anxiously in excitement to demonstrate their love for their Imam. These companions who were prepared to give everything for their Imam. Ya laytana kunna ma'akum. Woe that we could be with you, O Ansar of Imam al-Hussein. Nafi says, the second thing that I saw is that Abu Abdullah, as he would walk from the tents from place to place, on the ground, there were these thistles. The seeds of some of the trees that existed in Karbala would drop a thorny seed that was a very pointy seed from its sides. He says, I saw as Imam al-Hussein would walk from places, checking each place, he would continuously brush away and remove these from the camp wherever he could. I asked Imam, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, why do I see you doing this action? Why am I seeing you cleaning the ground? He says, oh Nafi, tomorrow these tents will be burned. In that burning of these tents, my women and children, our women and children, will run from tent to tent in fear and difficulty. I remove these from the ground of Karbala so that they are not a source of pain and discomfort for my women and children as they run after my death from place to place seeking security and assistance. Nafi narrates after this that there was an incident where Abu Abdullah, as he was going from tents, that he went to one of the women that were crying. In this night, there were noted that two women wept in this night. One was Kulthum, who sat alone in her tent crying. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas found her. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, upon hearing the crying of his sister, came running. Oh sister, what has made you cry? Kulthum wept. She said, oh Abbas, every lady in the tents of Imam al-Hussein, every lady in Karbala tonight is preparing her children and her sacrifice for tomorrow. Zainab was sitting in her tents preparing Own and Muhammad. Farwa was sitting preparing Qasim. Layla was preparing Ali and al-Akbar. Kulthum says, oh Abbas, I have no children to sacrifice for Hussein. Who will I present as my sacrifice? Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, seeing his sister in this condition, they say he sat before her. He said, oh sister, tomorrow Abbas will be your sacrifice. I will present myself on the field of Karbala from you, O Kulthum. Don't be sad. Don't cry. Abbas is here. As long as Abbas is alive, you should not weep. Oh Abbas, how was going to comfort your sisters tomorrow after your shahadat? When they came to Abu Abdullah and they said, where is Abul Fadl? Where is Abbas? Your brother Hussein will be unable to even say that Abbas is shaheed. They describe the day of Ashura when the sisters of Hazrat Abbas asked Kulthum and Zainab, where is our brother Abbas? Imam al-Hussein, not having the words to say Abbas is shaheed, will go to your tent and knock down the pole that holds up the tent to say that now Abbas is no more. This is one lady who was weeping in the tents. The other lady that they say was weeping in the tents was Rabab. And that Rabab sat in her tent weeping. And when Imam al Hussein comes to her, he says, oh Rabab, why are you crying? And she says, oh Abu Abdullah, every mother is preparing her sacrifice, but my Asghar is but 6 months. I have no sacrifice to prepare for you, Abu Abdullah. What shall I present? How shall I show my face before Sayyida Zahra? That everyone sacrificed from themselves for her son, but I had nothing to sacrifice. Imam al-Hussein comforts Rabab and says, don't worry, Rabab, tomorrow even your sacrifice will be accepted. Prepare this Asghar to enter into the field as well too, for he too shall fight like a soldier, and his fight will be like none other that anyone will present. The fight of Asghar tomorrow will be his breaking of the ranks of the army of Umar Sa'ad over the Mazlumiyat, the innocence of this child, and the way that this child is killed in the field of Karbala. The description of the difficulty of Shahadat of Asghar, one poet narrates that he says this grave of Asghar that is dug in the day of Ashura that is unique was to protect Asghar from the collecting of heads after the Shuhada. They said that when Abu Abdullah made this grave, he filled in the grave from the feet, then he filled in the legs, he filled in the chest. They said that then we imagined that Abu Abdullah wept and he said, oh Asghar, how shall I cover your face? This sand is so hot, your skin is so delicate. How shall I leave you in this place? Abu Abdullah told Rabab of even her sacrifice. Nafi ibn Hilal says that after this, Abu Abdullah went out into the field of Karbala and went to the place of every shaheed. And he described to me, he says, oh Nafi, here my Habib will die. Here my Zuhair will be killed. Here Muslim, here Burair. Here is where my Akbar will take his spear in his chest. Here my Qasim will be run over by horses. Nafi continues, he says that in this night, I said, oh Abu Abdullah, I hear a crying in the field of Karbala. I hear a calling in the field of Karbala. It makes my heart uneasy. Abu Abdullah, shall I go and investigate it? Imam al-Hussein says, no, Nafi, don't pay attention to it. Nafi says, but Abu Abdullah, the sound that comes from the field of Karbala, not from the tents, it makes my heart uncomfortable. Abu Abdullah, tell me what it is, or I shall go and I shall seek it out myself. It is my responsibility to defend you tonight. Abu Abdullah, how shall I answer your father if I'm not ready in your defense? Tell me, what should I do? Imam al-Hussein turns and he says, oh Nafi, the way I show you all of the places of your Shahada tomorrow, this is the sound of my mother Zahra, who sits on the place where I will be killed tomorrow, and she weeps there for me where I shall die. You are hearing the weeping of my mother Zahra. Oh Nafi, don't disturb my mother Zahra this night. This is a night about which she has been crying for many years. Don't disturb her in this night. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Let's raise our hands in dua. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. 10 times let's call out with our most sincere voices. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, بحق الحسين وجده وأبي وأمه وأخي وتسعة المعصومين من ذريته. Oh Allah, accept the small ibadat from us. Ya Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, there are those who have gathered with hajat in this night and in this place, and by the dhikr of the Masa'ib of Ali Muhammad, fulfill their hajat. Ya Allah, the mu'mineen, wherever they are around the world who are suffering through difficulties, give aman to the mu'mineen wherever they may be. Ya Allah, give shifa'a and cure from sickness and disease to the mu'mineen, the Muslimeen, and all of the people who are suffering around this world. Ya Allah, remove this virus and sickness from all people. Give shifa'a to all people. Ya Allah, count us amongst the ashab of Imam al-Hussein. Ya Allah, keep us, our lineage, our children, our families on the upright religion of Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, in this night, make us from the supporters and lovers of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us from his upright supporters. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam al-Zaman. Take our tears and present them before our Imam as our sincerity to serve our Imam and to avenge the shahadat of Imam al-Hussein in Karbala with him. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Oh Allah, make us and our families the supporters of Imam al-Zaman and entitle us to Shafa of Abu Abdullah in dunya and in akhirah. As tonight is a night of dua, as a night is a night of talab and hajat, the greatest hajat that we have, the greatest request that we have is the reappearance of Imam al-Zaman. Collectively, let's take a moment now and recite Dua Faraj, that may Allah hasten the reappearance of our master, of our Imam, and make us from his supporters. Give us the good news of the coming of Imam al-Zaman and that we are amongst his supporters. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Remember in this night, any ibadat that you do from the mustahabbat, give a hadiyah to Imam al-Zaman, that honor any actions and any good deeds that you do as a gift to Imam al-Zaman, that may Allah hasten his reappearance and comfort his heart over the sadness of the shahadat of his father, Abu Abdullah, and make us from his supporters. رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.